The book of 1 Samuel, it gets its name from the person that we first start reading about there, Samuel. Samuel had all kinds of roles: priest, prophet, judge, all the big roles. Someone correctly wrote, all the great predicates which Israel had to bestow have been heaped on this man. It's true, he wore all kinds of hats. When Samuel's much older, the people tell Samuel they want a king. They want to be like the other nations. They didn't have a king yet. That's one role Samuel didn't fill. But the people said that's who they wanted. They wanted a king. So the book goes on to tell about God giving the people of Israel their first king. The king's name is Saul. And of Saul it was written, after Saul had assumed rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side: Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hands of those who had plundered them. A valiant fighter. Yet in the next chapter, King Saul had made his rules the right rules, and he forgot about God's rules. Samuel told King Saul, "You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king of Israel." Saul's reign of 42 years had come to an end. Yet the big story, the story of God working with people, it continued. Continued with a man named David. Up front, let's recognize who this man named David is. He's an ancestor of Jesus. At the very beginning of Matthew, we read this. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then in verse 5, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. It's this David that's the ancestor of Jesus. It's David the psalm writer. Over 70 psalms attributed to this man. He's also David of David and Goliath fame. It's that David. You can learn many things from his life, but today we'll find some lessons in his selection when he was chosen to be king. Samuel sent out to appoint the new king. Let's read in 1 Samuel chapter 16. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I've chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons, and he invited them to the sacrifice. At God's command, Samuel had traveled to Bethlehem to appoint the new king. You'll remember later on another king came out of Bethlehem. And that's when I want to stop now and ask you if you let that king be king of your life. If you haven't, that will be the best choice that you can make today. So Samuel arrives, and with the town elders, with Jesse and his family, he gets the sacrifice ready. Verse 6. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They're still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He's tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We'll not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah. Samuel, a man who had grown up looking to God and looking at God's ways, he had a challenge in front of him. I'll indicate a man, Samuel, says God, so you keep your eye out for him. Samuel was looking. He looked at Eliab, but it wasn't him. He looked at Abinadab, but it wasn't him. He looked at Shammah, but it wasn't him. Looking at 7 sons, but it wasn't them. David, the youngest, is called, and Samuel is told he's the one to anoint as king. It's not where Samuel was looking. He certainly wasn't looking at the youngest son. So what are you looking at? What are you looking at? Much of the time, you and I are looking at other people too. Samuel, he knew what this was like. Verse 2, Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." Saul was being looked at by Samuel, and Saul wasn't even there. In his mind, Samuel had his eyes on King Saul, even though Saul wasn't there. A lot of the time, you and I are looking at other people. From there, we get our first lesson. Do what is right, even if others are looking. Do what is right, even if others are looking. Even when other people are looking at you, do the right thing. Samuel worried about those who were watching. It doesn't matter what others are looking at, even if they're looking at you. Samuel was almost led to do the wrong thing simply because he knew that others were watching him. He knew people had their eyes on him, and that made him fear for his life. God, if it's good with you, I'll just stay here and want you just bring the boys from Bethlehem to me. And God could have done that, but God didn't. Even when he knew he was being watched, even when he knew there might be a better way, a more comfortable way, what did Samuel do? It was in verse 4. Samuel did what the Lord said. Verse 4 can be your verse. You did what the Lord said. My younger cousin Matt came to mind as I thought through this. I've told you about him before. He and I had the secret club. It was just the two of us. It was that secretive. We had that in a tree house, up in my tree house, and we had the secret handshake. You may have remembered that, the flat-handed handshake. Matt's education was in business and in finance. He's worked at a bank most of his working life, and he started at the ground level and he worked all the way up to being president and CEO. 2 weeks ago, Matt resigned so he could start working for a full-time group, for a full-time job with a nonprofit organization, a group that's focused on meeting the physical and spiritual needs of the community. Are others looking? Well, the bank shareholders, the bank board, customers, they're all looking. They're watching Matt's decisions. Their interests are tied to Matt's decisions. Family's looking. More people are looking. But Matt knew that. But I know Matt. Now his verse 4 reads, Matt did what the Lord said. Our choices in life are pretty complex in many ways, yet they're pretty simple in others. Right or wrong, God's way or my way. All of our decisions are often made up of those extremes of choices. What influences that choice? Well, sometimes it's simply knowing that people are looking. Do what is right, even if others are looking. So what are you looking at? Much of our time can be spent looking at other people, looking at their actions or their lack of actions, how they dress, their style, their manners, even the color of their skin. When that's all you see, you're seeing things like Samuel saw them. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. He's the oldest, or he's big, he could certainly lead an army, or I'll bet it's this one. He's just got this look about him. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Samuel had his glasses taken off, cleaned, and then put back on. God said, this is how I see, and it's how I want you to see. Jeff Mills writes for a North Carolina newspaper, and for Father's Day last Sunday, he wrote about a pair of eyeglasses that he wears. I see the world through my father's eyes, or more accurately, through my father's eyeglasses. I lost my dad 4 years ago this month when his big, kind heart stopped suddenly and without warning late on a Friday night. He was home playing a game of solitaire on the computer before bed, and then he was gone. I can't help but remember my dad, and that's by design. I wear a constant reminder every day, a tool that allows me to see clearly. My eyeglasses were his eyeglasses. For the last 4 years, I've worn a 74-year-old man's glasses. I have my dad's last set of frames filled with my prescription progressive lenses. No fancy brand name or description. Aerostar, size 54, model number 16213, made by Charmant, USA. Metal frames, the bottom half rimless. A bold-fashioned statement from my dad. No fancy color names like gunmetal or obsidian or bronze. These come in gray, black, and brown. When it came time for the optician to fit the glasses to my face and over my ears, the frames needed no adjustments. My father and I saw the world differently at times. I'm not a carbon copy. He taught me to be my own man, but we always shared the same vision of what this world could be, and now we share a simple pair of eyeglasses. Your Heavenly Father wants to share His eyeglasses with you. No fancy names, no stylish colors, just a reminder of how your Father sees. Do what is right, even if others are looking. See the way your Father sees. Our second lesson really makes sense now. Some people need you to look at them again. Some people need you to look at them again. Some people in your life need you to see them. They need you to see their hearts, not their clothes. They need you to see their present, not their pasts. Their hurts, not their hurtfulness. Their potential, not their unlikeliness. And to see those things, you need to see with God's eyes. He sees the heart, those things inside of a person. Notice how Samuel learns all of this. He's in conversation with God. The Apostle Paul writes, pray continually in 1 Thessalonians 5. And that's often is explained as, well, what Paul's saying is we need to have a habit of prayer. But I think Paul means what he wrote. Pray continually. Do what Samuel did. Talk to God all the time. You have to pray, to ask, to listen, all to have the ability to see like God sees. So, what are you looking at? Much of the time we're looking at older people. Even in Bethlehem they had elders. They had older men who would oversee the life of the town. You learn that among the older or experienced, it's not the only place to be looking. Verse 10. Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse answered. He's tending the sheep. Samuel said, send for him. He will not sit down until he arrives. So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Samuel may not have been the only one surprised at the calling of the youngest. Jesse, the dad, sounds like he may even be wondering if the right one's being called. Some people need you to look at them again. Use your Father's eyes to see those around you, to really see them. Our final lesson, know that God uses young people. Young people, God is looking at you. He knows what He can do with you if you'll let Him. Young people, we are looking at you. We're watching you grow in God. Don't count yourself out because of your age, because God hasn't. He's counted you in. To all of us, as you look at young people in your church family, ask yourself some questions. Are you reading, praying, and listening to how God wants to use them? Do you encourage the parents of the young people? They are the parents, the church isn't, yet the church can support the work of the parents. When God makes a young person's calling clear, do you support them? Know that God uses young people. The youngest son was chosen to be king. What are you looking at? We're looking at others, and in that we have our lessons. Do what's right even if others are looking. Some people need you to look at them again, and know that God uses young people. And all of these you have to see with your Father's eyes. Thanks to Samuel and David and God, we're ready to face the world again this week. I wish you good looking.